The wind moved through the broken city like a whisper, carrying dust and the smell of fire. The buildings were tall ones, shining with alien power. But now they stood like dead giants, their walls broken, their glass scattered, silence covered. Everything except for the slow footsteps of one human. Walking carefully through the ruins. His name was Daniel, a lone explorer from Earth. He was far from home, far from his people, searching for signs of life in this forgotten world. His scanner blinked with weak signals faint, signs of movement. Maybe survivors, maybe danger. Daniel tightened his grip on his weapon, his heart beating louder with each step. He had heard stories about this planet. It was once full of alien life, strong and proud. But war had burned it empty. The great empire that ruled here was gone, eaten by its own battles. Now only ghosts remained. Or so he thought. Turning a corner, Daniel froze. In the middle of the broken street stood a figure, tall and thin. Her skin shining faint blue under the dim light. She was not human, but a Lena widow with long silver hair, her eyes glowing with pain and hunger. Around her were 3 small children, their bodies weak, their stomachs empty, their eyes wide with fear. Daniel raised his weapon, but the widow lifted her hand slowly, not to fight, but to beg. Her voice was soft, broken, carrying words that shocked him more than any weapon. "Good human," she said, her voice trembling, "adopt my hungry children and be my mate." Daniel stood frozen. He expected a trap, maybe an ambush. But her words carried no lie. She was not a soldier, not an enemy. She was desperate. A mother with nothing left, the children hid behind her legs. Their small bodies shaking. They were thin, so thin that Daniel could see the bones under their skin. Their eyes looked at him with fear, but also with hope. As if this strange human was their last chance to live, Daniel lowered his weapon slowly. His heart heavy. Why would an alien widow ask this of a human? Why him? The question burned in his mind, but before he could speak, the widow continued, "My mate is gone, killed in the war." She whispered, her voice breaking, "My people will not help me. They say my children are weak. They say I must let them die." She looked into his eyes, her tears glowing like liquid silver. "But I believe humans are different. You protect your young. You fight for family. You do not leave the weak." Behind, Daniel felt the weight of her words. She was right. Humans never gave up on family, never abandoned their children. But this was not his family. This was not his world. Why should he risk everything for them? The silence between them grew heavy. Daniel's mind raced. Was she trying to trick him? Was this some alien way to capture humans? Or was this truly a cry for help, a last wish from a dying mother? The widow stepped closer, slowly, carefully. Her children clung to her legs, their small hands trembling. Her eyes met his, deep and full of pain. "I ask you, human, because I have no one else." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had faced dangers before, beasts, even machines, but never this. Never the request to take on a family, to protect lives that were not his. And yet, there was something. In her eyes, something he could not ignore. The city around them was dead. But here stood life, fragile and weak, asking him for strength. The sound of his scanner beeped again, picking up movement nearby. Daniel's instinct screamed. Danger was close. Something was watching them, but he could not move. Not yet. Not until he gave her an answer. The widow's voice came again, softer this time, almost breaking. "Adopt my hungry children. Be my mate. Save them." Daniel felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He was only one man, one human on a broken world. But in that moment, it was also something more. Hope. He looked at the children's 3 pairs of eyes staring at him, waiting. For his choice, would he turn away and leave them to die? Or would he step into their lives, take on a role he never imagined, and face whatever dangers came with it? The silence grew sharper, the air colder. The ruined city seemed to hold its breath. Waiting, Daniel's hand tightened on his weapon, but not to raise it, to lower it completely. For the first time, his voice cut through the silence. Steady, but heavy. "Why me?" he asked, his words simple, but filled with weight. The widow's answer was a whisper, almost lost in the wind. Because only humans fight when there is no hope. And in that instant, Daniel knew this was no trap, no trick. This was the beginning of something far bigger, but danger was already moving in the shadows. Closer and closer, unseen but near, the story had only just begun. The silence of the ruined city wrapped around them like a heavy blanket. Daniel's question still hung in the air. Why me? The widow's answer had been soft, but it struck him like a blade, because only humans fight when there is no hope. Her words pulled at something inside him, something buried deep. Memories of Earth came rushing back in midges of human history. Small tribes standing against empires, weak nations fighting against giants. Again and again, humans had been underestimated, and again they had survived. Daniel lowered his scanner. But his ears caught faint echoes in the ruins. Something was moving in the distance. Watchers, maybe predators, maybe raiders. The city was not empty, and the widow knew it. Still, she stood tall, though her shoulders shook with exhaustion. She took a step forward, her children clinging tightly too. Her long cloak, "My name is Leona," she whispered, her voice still trembling. "My people. They do not see me anymore. They call me cursed." Her glowing eyes turned away, staring into the broken skyline as if searching for something lost. Daniel said nothing, only listening. Leona raised a hand and touched her chest. "My mate." He was a soldier, a leader. When the war came, he fought to protect us. Her words broke for a moment, and she swallowed hard before continuing, but he never returned. His body was never found. Only ashes remained and whispers that he was a traitor. The children's eyes widened as they heard their mother speak. They had heard these stories before, but never told with such pain. Leona placed her hands on Surf. Leona placed her hands on Surf. Unsleeved Surf, long-lasting color. And whispers permind, and whispers that you asar, we elisais. Their heads, holding them close, my people turned against us. They said I was weak. They said my children carry the blood of a coward. Her voice hardened, filled with quiet rage. They left us to starve. They waited for us to die. Her gaze shifted back to Daniel, sharp and desperate. But I will not let them die. Not while I can still breathe. That is why I ask you, human. Daniel's mind raced. This was not just a plea for food, not just a cry for shelter. This was something deeper. A family abandoned, a widow cast out by her own kind, and now she was asking him, a stranger from another world, to carry their future. The children peeked from behind their mother's cloak. Their eyes were large, glowing faint like hers, but weaker, fading. They were hungry, fragile, yet still alive, still holding on. One of them, the smallest, stretched out a tiny hand toward Daniel, as if asking for something he could not name. Daniel felt his chest tighten again. He had been on many worlds, had seen many alien faces, but never before had he seen eyes that begged him not as an explorer, not as a soldier, but as a father. Still, suspicion clawed at his mind. Why a human? He asked again, his voice low. Steady. You have your own kind. Why not them? Lirana shook her head, her silver hair catching the broken light. My kind are blind. They see only strength in numbers, only power in armies. She lifted her hand and pointed at him, her finger trembling. But you. Your people carry a fire that others fear. A fire that burns brightest when the night is darkest. Her words stirred something deep in Daniel. Something he wanted to ignore but could not. He remembered the stories of Earth, the countless times when humanity had been underestimated. He remembered why he had left his home in the first place, to prove that humans could stand among the stars. The silence broke suddenly. A crash echoed from the far end of the street. Metal falling against stone. Daniel spun, weapon raised, his eyes scanning the shadows. Shapes moved too far to see clearly, but close enough to feel. Lirana pulled her. "Children, closer," her voice dropping to a whisper. "They are watching us." "They always watch." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Who?" "The hunters," she replied, her voice heavy with fear. "They came after my mate fell. They wanted me gone, and my children gone too. But I survived." Barely. Her hands trembled as she spoke, but her eyes still glowed with defiance. "They will come again. They always come again." Daniel's grip tightened on his weapon. He had walked into this city thinking it was empty. But now he realized it was a battlefield still alive, and in the middle of it stood this widow and her children, fragile, unwanted, yet still breathing, still fighting. He looked at them. Then at the shadows creeping closer. Liruna's voice trembled as she spoke again. "Now do you see, human, why I need you? Why I chose you?" Daniel's heartbeat thundered in his chest. He was only one man, far from home, carrying no army, no backup, but he was human, and humans had always fought hardest when alone. The children pressed against their mother, their wide eyes locked on Daniel, waiting, hoping, fearing. The air grew colder, the shadows longer. The hunters were near, closer than before. Daniel looked at Lirona one last time. Her voice was soft but sharp, filled with both desperation and belief. "Adopt them. Human, stand with me. For if you do not, this night will be their last." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of footsteps in the dark. The hunters were coming. The secret was out. Lirona was not just a widow, not just a mother. She was prey, and now so was he. Daniel stood in the ruins, his breath slow but heavy. The widow's words still echoed in his mind. "Adopt them, human. Stand with me. For if you do not, this night will be their last." The shadows around them thickened, faint noises crawling. Through the empty streets, the hunters were moving closer. Their steps silent, but their presence strong. The ruined city felt alive, but alive in the way a predator waits for prey. Daniel's hand gripped his weapon, his finger brushing the trigger. He could fight, yes, but fight for what? For who? He was alone, far from Earth, far from his mission, far from any command that would tell him what to do. And yet, here was a widow begging him to take her children as his own. Here were eyes, wide and hungry, staring at him like he was their last chance. Daniel felt torn in two. One part of him screamed, "Walk away. Stay alive. This is not your fight." But another part whispered, "This is why you are here. This is why humans exist, to fight when others would fall." The children pressed closer to their mother's legs. The smallest one let out a soft cough, weak and broken. It pierced Daniel's chest like a knife. He had seen soldiers die. He had seen enemies fall. But the sound of a child fading was worse than any battlefield. Daniel's jaw tightened. He remembered his training, the cold lessons drilled into him. Survive first. Do not take risks for strangers. But he also remembered Earth's history, the people who fought not for themselves, but for others. The men and women who took in orphans, who carried the weak, who refused to let the flame of life go out. Damn it, Daniel whispered under his breath. His weapon felt heavier, not from its weight, but from the choice pressing against it. He looked at Lirona, the widow, her eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Wet with tears, but fierce with hope. She did not beg again. She only waited, her silence louder than her words. Her children's small hands gripped her cloak tighter, their eyes locked on Daniel, waiting for the answer that could mean life or death. Another sound cut through the night, closer this time, metal scraping stone, claws against broken walls. The hunters were near. Their whispers carrying through the ruins, harsh and sharp. They spoke in a tongue Daniel could not fully understand, but one word was clear. Pray. His heart pounded faster. He could walk away now. Leave them, finish his mission, survive. But if he did, the hunters would tear through the widow and her children before the next sunrise. The thought burned in his mind. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deep. He saw faces his mother, his father, his people on earth. He heard voices, old stories of humanity's stubborn fire. And then he opened his eyes, his decision clear. He lowered his weapon, then lifted it again, this time with purpose. He stepped forward, placing himself between the widow and the approaching shadows. His voice was steady, his words simple. If they want, pray. They will find a human who does not run. Lirana's eyes widened, her breath catching. The children clung tighter. But this time, not just out of fear, out of trust. Daniel had chosen. Still, doubt gnawed at him. What if he failed? What if he couldn't protect them? He had no army, no backup, only his wits and his weapon. But maybe that was enough. Maybe that was what made humans different. The hunters' whispers grew louder, echoing across the broken walls. Daniel could see faint outlines, new figures moving low, quick, their eyes glowing faint red in the dark. Predators, skilled and merciless. They wanted blood. And they believed the human would be easy prey. Daniel glanced back at Lirona. Her lips moved silently, whispering words he did not understand. A prayer maybe, or a promise. Then she met his eyes, and for the first time he saw something more. Then fear in her gaze, he saw belief. That belief struck deeper than any weapon. She believed in him, a human, a stranger. More than she believed in her own people. The weight of it pressed on him, but it also lit a fire. Daniel turned back toward the shadows, his grip firm. He would fight not because it was his mission, not because it was smart, but because someone had to. And in this moment, in this ruined city, he was the only one who could. The hunters drew closer, their growls rolling through the silence. Daniel's mind sharpened, planning, calculating. The city was broken, but the ruins were tools, collapsed walls, sharp glass, old wires. A battlefield waiting to be shaped. His heart beat steady. Now, no longer torn, his choice was made. He would not abandon them, not tonight, not ever. He would fight, even if it meant death. He looked back one last time at the widow and her children. His words were simple, but heavy with meaning. Stay behind me. Whatever happens, do not run. The children nodded, their eyes wide but filled with something new, hope. Liruna's lips trembled, but she whispered back, "You are human, and that is enough." The night grew darker, the hunters closer. Daniel lifted his weapon, his eyes hard, stance ready. The human's dilemma was over. His path was chosen. Now came the test of that choice. And in the ruins of a dead world, the fight for life was about to begin. The city held its breath. The night grew colder, the silence sharper. Only the sound of footsteps echoed slow, deliberate, circling the ruins like wolves around prey. Daniel stood ready, his weapon raised behind him. Lirona pulled her children close, wrapping her cloak around them like wings. Their glowing eyes peeked out wide with fear, yet fixed on the human who stood in front of them. The shadows shifted, and finally the hunters revealed themselves. Figures stepped into the broken light, tall and lean, their skin dark like stone, their limbs long and sharp, their eyes burned red, glowing in the dark, hungry and merciless. They carried blades made from bone and steel, their movements smooth like predators who had done this many times before. Daniel counted 6 of them. But he could hear more. The hunters moved silently, their bodies low, spreading out. They were not rushing in, they were patient. Like spiders waiting for the web to close, one of them hissed, its voice sharp and cold. The words were in a tongue Daniel could not fully understand, but the meaning was clear. Prey. Daniel felt his prey. Daniel felt his pulse steady. He had fought enemies before, but these were different. These were not soldiers. These were killers who enjoyed the hunt, who wanted fear as much as blood. The leader of the hunters stepped forward. Its armor was marked with symbols carved deep into bone, trophies of past kills. It raised its blade and pointed it at the widow and her children. Then it laughed a sound like cracking stone. Daniel moved between them, his weapon aimed at the leader. His voice was steady, firm. "You'll have to go through me first," the hunters hissed again, the sound rising like a chorus of snakes. Their red eyes locked on him now, no longer. On the widow, the leader tilted its head, studying the human. Then it whispered one word in broken common tongue. "Fragile." Daniel smirked, his jaw tightening. They thought he was weak, just another easy kill, but they had no idea what a human could do when cornered. The hunters began to close in, slow, careful. Daniel's mind raced, scanning the environment. The ruins were full of broken walls, jagged metal, shattered glass, traps waiting to be born. He stepped back slightly, keeping the hunters focused on him. He whispered over his shoulder to Lorona, "Stay down. Keep them quiet." She nodded, clutching her children tighter. Her eyes never left him, glowing with both fear and something stronger, faith. The first hunter lunged, moving fast, its blade raised high. Daniel sidestepped, rolling to the side, and fired. The crack of his weapon shattered the silence. The hunter screamed as the shot tore through its shoulder, spinning it into the rubble. The others hissed louder, their red eyes burning brighter. They rushed forward now. No more patience, no more games. The hunt had begun. Daniel fired again, hitting one in the leg, dropping it to the ground. But there were too many, too close. One swung its blade. Daniel blocked with his rifle, the force. Shaking his arms, another tried to strike from the side, its claws slashing the air. Daniel kicked a broken metal beam, sending it crashing into the creature's chest. The ruins came alive with chaos gunfire. Screams, the sound of steel against steel. Dust filled the air. Broken glass crunched under their feet. Daniel moved like a soldier, but also like something else, like a man who refused to fall. The hunters were fast, faster than him, but they underestimated his mind. He pulled wires from the rubble, wrapping them around a beam, then ducked behind cover when one leaped forward. It landed straight onto the wires, sparks exploding as energy surged through its body. The creature shrieked, twisting before collapsing. Into the dust, the leader hissed in rage, its blade glowing faint red now. It pointed again at the widow, its voice rising. "Mate. Children. Prey." Daniel's blood boiled. They weren't here for food, not for sport alone. They wanted to erase her line. Erase her children because of who her mate had been, because of the blood they carried. He shouted back, his voice fierce, "They're not your prey. Not while I'm here." The hunters charged as one, their blades flashing. Daniel ducked, rolled, fired. Every move fueled not just by survival, but by something deeper, rage. He was one man against many, but humans had always been outnumbered. And yet, humans had always found a way. One hunter slashed across his arm, pain burning hot. Daniel gritted his teeth, using the momentum to slam his rifle butt into the creature's jaw. A new leaped, but he grabbed a broken pipe and drove it. Upward, the point piercing its chest. The hunter screamed, then fell silent. Blood and dust mixed in the air. The children whimpered behind their mother, their small voices muffled by her cloak, but they watched with wide eyes as the human fought like no other. Still, there were too many. Daniel's breaths grew heavy. His weapon hot in his hands, the leader circled now, slower. Its red eyes never leaving his. It raised its blade higher, the markings on its armor glowing faintly. This one was not like the others. This one wanted him alive, to make his death slow. Daniel wiped the blood from his face, his voice steady, though his body ached. "You think I'm fragile?" he growled. "Come find out," the leader hissed. Stepping forward, the night was far from over. The battle had only just begun. The night exploded with sound. Blades struck metal. Gunfire cracked through the ruins, and the hunters' shrieks echoed like wild beasts in the dark. Daniel's breath came heavy, but his focus was sharp. He stood bleeding from his arm. Dust clinging to his skin, yet his stance never faltered. Behind him, Lirona shielded her children with her cloak, whispering to keep them calm. Her glowing eyes fixed on the human who fought for them. The leader of the hunters circled, its blade glowing. Faint red, the markings across its armor pulsed like veins of fire. Its red eyes locked on Daniel with cruel delight. This was not just a hunt anymore. This was a challenge, a duel. Daniel raised his weapon, his jaw tight. "You wanted prey," he growled, "but tonight you found a human." The leader hissed, and with a sharp gesture, "Gosh." The remaining hunters attacked. They rushed like shadows, their claws and blades flashing in the dim light. Daniel fired, each shot striking fast and true. One hunter fell. Clutching its chest, another spun away with a leg torn by his bullet. But there were too many, and they closed in. A blade scraped across his shoulder, burning with pain. Daniel turned, smashing the rifle stock into the attacker's skull. The crack loud, the creature falling limp. Another lunged low, claws reaching for his legs. Daniel kicked it hard, using the wall behind him to push off, flipping his body out of reach. He hit the ground hard, rolled, and came back up firing. The hunters hissed louder, but their surprise was clear. This human was not running, not begging, not dying. He was fighting with fury. And every move was unpredictable. Humans did not fight like soldiers of great empires. They fought like survivors. Using everything around them as a weapon, Daniel grabbed a shard of broken glass from the ground and threw it. The shard cut across a hunter's throat, sending it shrieking into the dust. He ducked behind a collapsed wall, pulled loose wires from the rubble, and set a trap in seconds when another hunter leaped over. It landed right on the wire's electric. Sparks surged, its body convulsing before it fell still. The leader roared, furious now. It charged, its blade swinging with deadly force. Daniel blocked, the impact rattling his bones. The blade's heat searing close, he twisted, using the leader's weight to slam it against a wall. But the alien was strong, stronger than him, shoved back. Claws grazing across his chest. Daniel staggered, coughing, blood filling his mouth. The leader raised its blade again, certain the human would finally fall. But Daniel's eyes burned with fire. "No," he whispered, "steady, not tonight." He grabbed a broken pipe, jammed it against the leader's arm, locking the blade, then with his free hand. He pulled a grenade from his belt, small, weak by military standards, but deadly in close quarters. He slammed it against the ground between them, sparks flashing. The blast tore through the air. Dust and fire erupting. Daniel was thrown back, hitting the rubble hard, his ears ringing. The leader staggered too, its armor scorched, parts of its blade melted. For the first time, it bled, dark liquid dripping across the stone. The other hunters froze, their red eyes wide. Their leader, wounded by a human, something they had never seen. Never believed possible, Daniel pushed himself up, coughing. His body aching, but his spirit unbroken. He spat blood, his voice hoarse but sharp. "You thought I was fragile," he growled, "but humans don't break." The hunters hissed uncertainly. Now, their steps faltering. Liruna's children peeked from under her cloak, their eyes wide with awe. They had never seen anyone stand against the hunters like this. For the first time, they saw hope. The leader roared in rage, charging again. Daniel braced himself, dodging at the last second, pulling the fight deeper into the ruins. He led the leader into narrow alleys, into broken halls where its size became a weakness. Every wall, every stone, every broken piece of the city became part of Daniel's battlefield. He smashed beams down to block paths, forced the hunters into choke points. He used sound-throwing rocks to mislead them, striking from the side every trap. Every trick bought him seconds, and seconds were life. The fight raged on, his body screaming with pain. But his mind refusing to quit. He was not fighting for victory alone. He was fighting for those children hiding in the shadows, for the widow who had chosen him, a human, to stand where no one else would. Finally, the hunters hesitated, pulling back. Their leader bled, their numbers broken, their certainty shaken. This was not how the hunt was meant to go. The leader's red eyes burned with fury, but even it stepped back now. It hissed something sharp and guttural, a command. The remaining hunters melted into the shadows, their shapes vanishing into the broken city. The ruins grew silent again. The echoes fading, Daniel dropped to one knee, his chest heaving, his weapon. Smoking blood dripped from his wounds. His vision swam, but he was still alive, behind him. Lirana rushed forward, her children clinging to her. She knelt beside him, her voice soft, filled with shock and something deeper. "You fought them. You made them run." Daniel forced a weak smile, his voice rough. "They'll be back," he muttered, "but now they know. Humans don't die easy." The children stared at him with wide eyes, no longer just with fear. To them, he was no longer a stranger, no longer just a human. He was their protector. The night was not safe. The war was not over, but for the first time, they believed they might survive it. The ruins were quiet again. The echoes of battle still lingered in the broken air. But the hunters were gone. For now, dust drifted slowly, glowing faint in the moonlight. Daniel leaned against a fallen wall, his chest heaving, blood running down his arm. He had survived, but just barely. His weapon was scorched, his body aching, and his strength thin as smoke. Still, he stood, because the children were watching. They peeked from behind Lirona, their wide, glowing eyes fixed on him, not with fear anymore, but with something else, something new. Hope. Lirona moved closer, her silver hair catching the pale light. She knelt beside him, her voice soft. "You should be dead, human, but you are not." Daniel gave a tired smile, wiping blood from his face. "Humans don't die easy," he whispered, the words rough but steady. Liruna's eyes searched his, and for a moment, her face softened. Her hand trembled as she reached toward his wound, but she pulled back, uncertain. Daniel noticed. "You know medicine?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "My people. We heal differently, but I will try." Daniel sat on a stone, letting his weapon rest at his side. Lirona tore a piece of her cloak, her fingers glowing faint blue as she pressed it against his shoulder. The wound burned, but slowly the pain dulled. Her power was weak, but really enough to stop the bleeding. Enough to keep him standing. The children edged closer now. One small hand tugged at Daniel's sleeve. He looked down to see the smallest child staring up at him, eyes wide. "You fight like Storm," the child whispered, voice thin and shaking. Daniel chuckled softly, the sound almost strange after so much silence. "Storms don't quit," he said. The child smiled faintly. The first smile Daniel had seen on any of them. Lirana watched this with quiet wonder. Her children had not smiled in months. Not since the war took everything, and now, with one human stranger, they found light again. But danger still hung heavy in the air. Daniel's eyes scanned the shadows. His voice low, "They'll come back." "Stronger, maybe more of them." Lirana nodded, her face grim. "They will not stop." "Not until we are gone." Silence fell between them for a moment, heavy and sharp. Then Lirana spoke. Her voice softer, trembling. "You could have left us. You could have saved yourself. But you stayed." Daniel looked at her, his eyes tired but firm. "You asked for help. I couldn't walk away." Her lips parted as if to say more, but she stopped. Her chest rose and fell as she steadied herself. "Finally," she whispered, "my mate was strong, but he did not return. I thought no one would stand for us again. But you did." Human, Daniel's jaw tightened. He did not want to be compared to another man, another warrior, but he saw the truth in her words, the raw honesty in her gaze. She was not asking him to replace her mate. She was telling him he had given them something even her people could not. A chance. The children crept closer still. Circling him slowly, they touched his arm, his weapon, his coat, as if to make sure he was real. Daniel let them, though he stayed alert. He was not used to being seen like this, not as a soldier, but as something more. Liruna's voice broke the silence again. "They already look at you as if you are their father," she whispered, her eyes soft, almost sad. "Do you understand what that means?" Daniel swallowed hard. He had never thought of himself as a father, had never wanted that life. But looking at the children thin, tired, clinging to him like a lifeline, something inside him shifted. It was not choice anymore, not duty. It was something deeper. He looked at Lirona, his voice quiet. "I don't know if I can be that. But I'll protect them. I'll protect you." Her eyes glistened, her breath catching. For a moment, she reached out and touched his hand. Her skin cool, glowing faint, a simple touch, but one filled with trust. "Then you are already more than I hoped," she said softly. The night grew colder, the wind cutting through the ruins. Daniel stood slowly, his body aching but his resolve firm. He looked at the broken skyline, shadows dancing across the rubble. "They'll come back. We can't stay here." Lirona nodded, gathering her children. "Then where?" she asked, her voice uncertain. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He had no plan, no map. But he knew one thing. Standing still meant death. "We move. We find cover. And when they come again, we'll be ready." The children clung to him now, as they moved, one holding his sleeve, another gripping his belt. Their trust was heavy, but it filled him with strength. For the first time in years, Daniel was not fighting just for himself. He was fighting for a family. The ruins stretched on, endless and dark. The hunters were still out there, waiting, planning, but in the middle of that broken world walked something new, a human, an alien widow, and 3 children bound together not by blood, but by survival. And somewhere in that bond, fragile but real, was the beginning of hope. The ruins stretched far into the night. Broken towers rose like dark teeth against the pale sky, and the cold wind carried the scent of ash. Daniel moved carefully through the rubble, Lirona close behind, her children clinging to her cloak. But reaching often for him, as if afraid he might vanish if they let go. Every shadow felt alive. Every sound seemed sharper. The hunters were gone, but Daniel knew they were not finished. They would return, stronger, angrier. His steps were heavy, his wounds burning, yet he walked on, not because he wanted to, but because they needed him. And for the first time in his life, he realized that was enough. They stopped at the remains of an old building. Its roof collapsed, but its walls still strong. Here, for a moment, there was shelter. Daniel dropped his weapon against the wall, his chest rising and falling with slow, tired breaths. The children huddled together, whispering softly in their alien tongue. Their voices were thin, weak, but not broken. Lorona knelt beside them, smoothing their hair, her silver eyes glowing, faint in the dark. When she looked up at Daniel, her gaze was steady. "You saved them," she whispered. "You gave them what even my own people would not." Daniel shook his head, wiping blood from his mouth. "I only bought us time," he muttered. "Dale, be back, and next time, it won't be just hunters. It'll be more." Lirana's eyes lowered, sadness in their glow. "Yes, they will not stop. Not until my children are gone. Not until my bloodline ends." Silence pressed down between them, broken only by the soft breathing of the children. Daniel looked at them thin, trembling yet alive, their eyes fixed on him with a kind of faith he did not deserve. He felt a weight heavier than any weapon, heavier than any battlefield. Responsibility. Lirana's voice came again, low, almost trembling. "That is why I asked you, human," she whispered, "to adopt them. To stand with me. Not just for this night, not just for survival, but for what comes after." Daniel froze, her words pressing into his chest like stone. He turned, meeting her gaze. Her eyes did not plead this time. They did not beg. They were steady, filled with strength and sorrow. "You want me to be their father," he said quietly. Her head dipped in a slow nod. "You already are, in their eyes. They see you as protector, as storm, as fire." Her lips trembled, but her voice did not break. "And I ask you to be my mate. Not as replacement, not as duty, but as choice. As bond." The words hung in the air, heavier than the silence before. Daniel's heart pounded, his mind racing. He was human, alone in an alien world, carrying no home, no family, no promises, and now here was a widow asking him to take everything she had left her children, her heart, her future. It was madness, and yet, when he looked at the children, clinging to each other, staring at him with wide hope, when he looked at Lorona, strong but fragile, broken but unyielding, he felt something stir inside him. A soldier survives for himself, but a protector survives for others. Daniel exhaled slowly, his voice low but firm. "I don't know if I can be what you ask," he said, "but I'll try. I'll fight for them, for you. For as long as I breathe." Lirana's eyes glistened, tears glowing silver. She reached out, her hand trembling, and placed it gently over his. "Then you are already what I wished for," she whispered. The children crept closer, surrounding him, their small hands tugging at his coat. One whispered, "Father," in broken common tongue. The words strange but clear. Daniel froze, his throat tight, his chest heavy. He had faced battles. He had faced death. But nothing struck him harder than that single word. For a moment, the ruins felt less empty. For a moment, the night felt less dark. But the peace did not last. A sound rolled through the city, deep, heavy, like thunder. Daniel's eyes narrowed, his body tense again. Laruna's face paled, her voice low. "They are coming back from the far end of the ruins." Lights flickered, red and sharp. The hunters had returned. But not alone, more shapes moved with them. Larger, stronger, armored, an entire warband. Marching through the broken city, their growls echoing, their blades glowing. The children whimpered, clinging tighter. Lorona held them close, her face fierce but fearful. Daniel rose slowly, lifting his weapon again. His body broken, but his fire unshaken. He looked at them, his family now, whether he admitted it or not. And his voice was calm, steady, filled with iron. "They'll come. They'll fight. And maybe I'll fall," he said. But before they touch you, before they lay a hand on your children, I'll take every last one of them with me." The hunter's roars filled the night, their red eyes burning brighter. The widow's tears fell silently. But her lips curved in the faintest of smiles, for she knew, in that moment, her wish had already been granted. The human was no longer just a stranger. He was protector, father, mate. And the night was no longer theirs alone. It was his too. The battle was not over, the story not finished, but in the broken city, under the dead sky, a bond stronger than war had been born, and that bond would change everything.